The second close. Perfect. How are you doing? I can start. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Nemo. To start with, welcome to the webinar. We have around 300 registrations today. And thanks everyone for attending. We'll be starting very soon. I'm seeing a lot of questions here. Thanks a lot. I believe everyone can hear us now. We had muted earlier. So I'm going to mark these. I'll be deleting the questions that talk about the mute. Okay. So give me a second. Okay, let's start. We can look at this slide, right? Start with, hi everyone, I'm Nemo. I am sometimes known as Abhay Rana. You can find me at nemo@razorpay.com. I work on UPI at Razorpay. So I'm the person heading our UPI integration at Razorpay. We've been in touch with iSpirit and we're part of the UPI hackathon as well. So we have been integrating currently with UPI. Moving on to what this webinar today is going to be all about. The first and the foremost thing I want to talk about is what UPI itself is. The idea of the webinar is to increase awareness about UPI as unified payment interface, and PCI has done a great job in bringing us all UPI today. And the idea is to bring some awareness about what UPI is, how it works, and what it means to all of us, including developers, including companies, merchants, customers, people who just have a bank account, people in villages, and everyone across India, what UPI can actually mean for payments in India. We'll be moving on after that to how exactly does UPI work. This won't be a very technical session, but seeing as around 40% of our registrations today have been developers themselves, we'll go into some details about how UPI works on technical level, somewhat. Moving on, we'll be talking a bit about how exactly you as a customer, you as a merchant will be handling UPI, and what exactly is required from you to integrate with UPI. And finally, we'll follow this with a Q&A session. This will last around 45 minutes or so. Yeah. So to start with, what exactly is UPI? So instead of taking it down as a boring step-by-step process defining what UPI does, I thought maybe let's try to make it somewhat different and talk about things that UPI does and doesn't do. So the idea is we'll figure out UPI does X and it does this thing particularly well, and UPI doesn't do these things. So we now have a clear demarcation of what UPI is about and what it is not. Because I've been seeing a lot of things on the internet which UPI can't do or is not currently capable of doing. And at the same time, UPI is a really, really neat thing that NPCI has brought about. And we should figure out what it can do and cannot. And that's a great way of defining UPI as a service today. So the first and foremost thing is UPI is just a new way to transfer money. There are a lot of complications involved in that, but the easiest way to understand UPI is it's a new way to transfer money between two consenting parties. You don't have to think of it as a unified payment interface, something that only developers can do, something only that only matters to merchants or customers or a specific target audience. It matters to everyone. It's similar to NEFT or RTGS transfers in that way. And we have seen things like IMPS earlier bring about by NPCI, and ultimately it's just a way to transfer money between two consenting parties, be these two parties in different banks, in the same bank, wherever they might be. We just want to transfer money between two bank accounts, and that is what UPI lets us do very, very easily. So the second thing that UPI does well is it's interoperable between different banks. Now, the obvious question rises, things like RTGS and NEFT have been there for quite some time, and even IMPS for 5-6 years, probably more. And we have, these things have had interoperability between banks to a certain degree. You can start an IMPS transfer from a bank and have guarantee that it will go through to any different other bank We have check clearing systems which work across banks. We have ATMs that work across banks. All these things are actually run by NPCI as well. And when UPI comes about, it carries this one step further. So currently, if you have a net banking application that you're using on the internet, or if you have a mobile banking application that is being provided to you by a certain banking provider, let's say HDFC or Kotak Bank, it only works for that particular bank. However, what UPI allows you to do is it allows you to have interoperability between different bank accounts, which means that even if you have a bank application that stands for HDFC, that's built and run by HDFC, you can still use it for other bank accounts belonging to other banks. So you can have a PNB bank account associated with. Sure. I see a note over here that asks me to be a bit slow. Thank you, Ronak. I'll try to speak a bit slow. Anything else? Okay. Can't see me. Wait, can I? Yeah, this is fine. So yeah, moving on. UPI is interoperable between different banks, which means even if you have a bank application of a particular bank, you can still use UPI as a payment method to transfer funds from a different bank account, which that particular bank application might not even own. They won't know about the transfer at all. They just act as an intermediary, which takes this information and passes it on to UPI itself. The next thing is UPI currently runs on top of the existing IMPS infrastructure. This is important because what happens this way, it's only for now, which means that there's a really neat way for NPCI to kickstart the UPI revolution, which means we already have our existing infrastructure to transfer money between bank accounts, which has been working really well, and it's called IMPS. So UPI essentially piggy banks on top of IMPS, so that UPI piggy banks on top of IMPS and lets any bank transfers that you make using IMPS will be same as any bank transfer you make using UPI. However, this is only a very early implementation, which means moving ahead, NPCI would likely involve more methods of transfer. Even today, for example, we have AEPS, which is Aadhaar-enabled payment system that is running alongside UPI as a alternative to IMPS. The next thing that I want to talk about is that UPI is betting heavily on smartphones in India. We have seen the smartphone penetration in India go up and up, and UPI essentially bets on that, which means currently UPI has a technological limitation of being available and accessible to people with smartphones, which is something that's understandable because of the high involvement of technology in this. So the idea of UPI is not just limited to just mobile transfers using an MPIN, which is the current implementation, but it also allows you to do third-party or to do the second-factor authentication using things like Aadhaar and biometric verification, which will allow you, which are again heavily dependent on smartphones. So this is interesting to note as a choice made by NPCI. The next thing is that UPI is not going to be, we'll start talking about things that UPI is not going to be. It's not a magical bullet, as we'll see ahead, but it's not going to be immediately available everywhere. So UPI has been in somewhat beta stage for a while now, but it's not accessible as of now to the general public. The release date that we are expecting is somewhere around April 8th. I'm going to go through this as well. Can you send the PDF for reference later? Yes, we'll be sending a PDF as well. We'll also be doing a blog post around the same, which will be a readable version of the webinar. UPI is not going to be immediately available everywhere, which means as of now, banks and other partners that are integrating with UPI are still undergoing this process, which means integration is still ongoing across the board. However, you can see UPI being accessible to the general public somewhere around the summer of this year. And this is not just for, does not mean you'll see it across all banks. Each and every bank will have different bandwidth available, different priorities for UPI. And it'll take somewhere from the summer of this year to the end of this year to see it accessible everywhere. UPI is not yet a mobile wallet killer. This is an interesting slide because this is the most talked about question that I've been seeing across the internet on various blogs and platforms. The answer is not very clear. everyone's asking, will UPI kill mobile wallets? And the answer is we don't know yet. Because as with every technology, the answer depends on the adoption itself. UPI has a lot of significant barriers to entry, which means there are things like smartphone penetration, and even things like whether the mobile banking applications will be available to the customers in Indian languages. Will that affect penetration of UPI? Of course it will. Mobile wallets have essentially flourished in India because they've allowed customers to spend money online very, very easily. So compared to the other payment methods, mobile wallets let you have a very low barrier of entry for a customer to make a payment. At the same time, UPI is far more easier for an end customer to use. If you go through the entire UPI flow, as we do towards the end of the seminar, it's far more easier for a customer to understand and use compared to even things like mobile wallets as of now. But this is but we don't know how many people will be adopting UPI. It's up to people to start using UPI, for merchants to start interoperating with it, for banks to start promoting it. And only if all of these things happen will UPI become a significant contender in the market against digital wallets. And there's also the issue that mobile wallets and UPI are essentially not, it's comparing apples and oranges at the same time. Mobile wallets allow you to spend money, but they also allow a lot of other things, while UPI is essentially a payment transfer method. Yeah, we'll go to the Q&A at the end. The next thing that UPI is not, it's not going to replace net banking. You'll still have to use your Internet Explorer browsers or whatnot to access your net banking, because once again, UPI does one thing, and it does that one thing really, really well, and that thing is money transfer. It will not replace net banking because of the very reason that net banking is not just money transfer. It's a lot of other things. You can buy health insurance, you can open a demat account, you can do stock trading, you can do a lot of different things on net banking that UPI does not care about, because it's not catered to the exact same requirements and needs as a net banking application. That is your bank application by HDFC or Kotak Bank, for example. They allow you to do far more different things. UPI allows you to transfer money. Think of it this way. And finally, UPI is not a magic bullet for payment processing. Believe this as someone who works at a fintech company, fintech being financial technology. Payments are really hard. Online payments are even more harder. UPI might solve some of the problems, it solves them really well, but it'll take a lot of time and nurturing before UPI can be anywhere close to a single solution. So, for instance, UPI is limited by the number of banks that support it. For example, if you have someone in a foreign bank, or someone who is in a non-participating bank, let's say a small-time cooperative bank somewhere, and they don't integrate with UPI yet, there's no way you can ask them to make a UPI payment. So you still have to go through the older methods. You'll have to ask them to send you a check. We'll go through the questions. So you have to understand that UPI, yeah, I'm not going to the question. UPI doesn't want to do all the things. As a result, it's still up to the banks and the other providers to integrate with it. And finally, there are a lot of other use cases for payments. It's not a magical bullet for payment processing because there are things like escrow payments that people want to do. And these things are not supported in UPI, at least as of now. Second part of the presentation and the webinar is what UPI means for everyone. So the idea is to go through all the demographics and the use cases for UPI that we have been seeing, and to figure out what it means for each and every one of you who's here today. So the first thing, customers. What does UPI mean for customers? It means that customers can now transfer money far more easily using their phones. It means that you get to do away with the net banking websites. You get to do away with the bank-specific mobile applications. You get a common interface on a single app. This app is still provided by a bank, but at the same time, this single application is now your entry to all of your different bank accounts. It now allows you to make fund transfers very, very easily. It allows you to make collect requests, which is something that UPI brings to the table, where you can say, hey, XYZ should be transferring me this much amount of money for this particular service. And it's up to UPI to take the payment ahead from there, and you'll get a notification as soon as the payment gets done. So it allows you to make collect payments, for example. And this is very interesting as a customer for you. So if you go to a restaurant, you want to split a bill, you can at the end of the day just start a collect request to your friend. And whenever the money transfer happens, it reaches your bank account directly. There's no involvement of a wallet where the money goes to your wallet, from the wallet comes to your bank account. It's a straight bank-to-bank transfer. So yeah, it's a really neat thing for customers to have in India today. Uh, and then on top of it, there are also other issues at the same time. For example, the UPI spec recommends an add beneficiary details step before every payment, even on mobile applications, as a fraud prevention and phishing prevention measure. So would this imply that, however, it's a recommended step, not a mandatory step, which means it's left up to the bank to implement it in whatever way they want to. Uh, but at the end of the day, it will definitely be a vast improvement upon the current payment transfer methods that we have today. For example, net banking and even mobile banking that we have today. Moving on to merchants. What can merchants expect from UPI? So this is particularly true of small-time merchants. Small-time merchants will benefit greatly from UPI because of the very reason of collect payments. So as soon as, let's say, even a small-time kirana merchant wants to accept a large payment from a regular customer, they can do it over UPI. All the merchant needs to ask is your mobile number and send you a collect request. So you go to the store and you tell the merchant, hey, this is 3,000 worth of things I'm buying. And the merchant asks your mobile number. The merchant sends a collect request for 3,000 rupees on your mobile number. You get a notification on your phone. You approve the request. Money is transferred directly to merchant's bank account. He doesn't have to wait any number of days, or he doesn't have to process a credit card. They don't have to worry about such things anymore. They can just initiate a collect request. So for a small-time merchant, it's really, really important and really, really nice thing to have. They can use the mobile app and do the exact same thing that you as a customer were doing in the earlier stage. For enterprises, though, it's slightly more complex. So while a small-time merchant can do it easily because of the small number of transactions they have, it gets complicated for larger merchants, because you can't expect an enterprise or a large merchant to start using a mobile app to ask customer for each and every payment that they're processing. But since customers are already paying them via the other methods, for example, you're already accepting payments via credit cards, debit cards, maybe even net banking and wallets. This essentially UPI becomes an additional payment method that you need to integrate and test with. Even then, every merchant would need to have a way to integrate with UPI, because not everyone will be granted access to it. So you can file collect requests to UPI even as a merchant, but it has to be via proper channel, which means you need some sort of verification or use a third party to do the final step. But it's still an additional hassle for every bigger merchant, because now instead of accepting credit cards and debit cards, you're also accepting UPI-based payments. And every payment method that you accept brings about its own problems. For example, how do you handle refunds? UPI doesn't have an answer for that yet. And finally, what can banks do? How does it change the scenario for banks? Banks can now compete with wallets, which is a really interesting idea. We've been seeing mobile wallets take away with the mobile payment revolution. At the same time, we have seen banks lag away heavily in this. Banks have tried to come up with their own digital wallets as of now, but we are seeing it's not really working out well for them. At the same time, once banks start having banks start integrating with UPI on the payment applications, they can start competing with mobile wallets, because it will start. Customers can easily start making fund transfers from account A to account B. Customers can easily start making payments without having to own a digital wallet. And finally, wallets. What does it change for wallets? This is also a very interesting question to see. What changes for wallets is that wallets will have to convince UPI and PCI and UPI to get them added to UPI. As of now, the key term over here is something NPCI calls PSP, which is a payment service provider. So what you'll be seeing this term a lot in the UPI discussions. A PSP, as of now, is essentially someone who owns a bank account. As in, currently, it's only a bank. Going ahead, wallets might be added to the scope of UPI, but we don't know. We don't know if NPCI will be willing to make that change. There's also a design influence, a consequence of the design decision taken by the NPCI to use IMPS as the backend for the payment infrastructure of UPI. So what happens essentially is anyone who who was interoperating with the current IMPS infrastructure can now interoperate with UPI as a payment service provider. The only organizations that are currently integrated with IMPS are the banks themselves, and as a result, wallets are currently out of scope of UPI because wallets do not interoperate with IMPS obviously. So that's on the wallet side. The next part is how exactly does UPI work? So before you go into that, let's do a quick revise. UPI runs on top of IMPS. UPI involves multiple parties. So the first party would be a payer and a payee. So let's say, essentially, as I said earlier, let's try to think of UPI as a payment transfer method. There's someone who wants to pay money, somebody else. The payer wants to send some money to pay. How exactly do they go about it? So we need to identify who exactly is the money coming from and where exactly is it going. So let's say there's the payer has the bank account details. So currently, since we are talking in current scope of UPI, it means that we are only talking about bank account transfers. We are not talking about, for example, wallet transfers, which might be implemented in a future version of UPI. So since it's a bank account transfer, let's say this and so is the bank account number. And this is the IFSC code of the Kotak Bank at the Gurgaon branch. At the same time, the payee has its own bank account details. So if I were to show you this today, you'd probably go online to your net bank account, make a IMPS or a NEFT transfer, which will take its own time to reflect in the bank accounts. Another thing that every customer has these days is a mobile number associated with the bank account. So I've kept the last digits same, I believe. Yeah. Let's try to simplify this somewhat, and let's just call them the payer bank account is account number 32 at a certain branch, and the pay bank account number is 95 at a different branch. So a nice way of representing the account numbers would be essentially, let's call them the account number at whatever branch you have. So it's like an email address. For example, your email address might be abc@gmail.com. Gmail.com is the provider that's giving you a mailing service. ABC is your own username. Similarly, 32@kkbk 0000261 would mean the account number 32 at the branch denoted by the IFSC code so and so. However, we also have mobile numbers. What if we also have other identifiers for a bank account? This is something that UPI does very neatly, and it allows you to have multiple representations of the same bank account. So, for example, the first representation that we considered was a bank account number at an IFSC code. Similarly, we can also have a mobile number, or maybe even, since it was a Kotak bank, maybe it was Alice at Kotak. And the other side of things, we have Bob@HDFC as a different bank account. Then, what if the customers also have Aadhaar cards? What if they have Aadhaar numbers? What if such and such @Aadhaar was also a unique identifier for a person? And what if there was a way for us to figure out this Aadhaar number maps to this particular bank account number, which is actually doable because of the way Aadhaar is implemented. Every Aadhaar number links back to a bank account somewhere. Next thing you have to realize is not all of these are exactly the same identifiers. While a bank account number plus an IFSC code would be uniquely identifying a particular bank. At the same time, this is something that's set on a global scale. Global meaning anyone across India could essentially take this and point it to a straightforward bank account number. NPCI can do this on their own. They know what an IFSC code is, where the branch is, what the bank account number is. This they can resolve it on their own because they'll be maintaining an index. By this I mean the mobile numbers. They can resolve the mobile numbers on their own. They can resolve the Aadhaar numbers to a bank account on their own. However, the Alice at the rate Kotak thing, it's a Kotak specific thing. There might be another Alice at the rate HDFC, which we don't know about. To differentiate between these two, you have to understand that these are different kinds of addresses. So we have a global address that is maintained by NPCI, so which would be something like bank account number plus an IFSC code. And then you have an account address, which is essentially maintained by the bank themselves. So the Kotak Bank knows who Alice is and what this bank account represents. Similarly, on the other side, we have Bob at the HDFC, which only HDFC knows who it belongs to. Nobody else outside of the HDFC infrastructure knows what the exact bank account details for this Bob at the HDFC alias is. And finally, this is how the payment starts. So far we have essentially seen that the payer wants to pay some money to the payee, and these are their credentials. So let's say the payer essentially wants to transfer some amount of money to Bob at the HDFC. That's the only thing I know about the payee at this point. So this identifier could have been different. It could have been a bank account plus an IFSC code. It could have been a mobile number. It could have been an Aadhaar number. It could also have been a RuPay card number, which would essentially mean a direct transfer to a debit card. We'll see all of those, but for simplicity's sake, let's just take one single example, which is Bob at the HDFC. What happens next? I ask Kotak to deduct my money and to add it to Bob at the HDFC, whoever that might be. Kotak goes and talks to NPCI and says, hey, when I'm representing NPCI over here, this is essentially the UPI payment infrastructure that is being called. Kotak goes and asks NPCI, please transfer 500 INR to Bob at the HDFC, whoever that might be. Kotak doesn't know who Bob at the HDFC is. Then NPCI, which means the UPI infrastructure, also doesn't know, interestingly, who Bob at the HDFC is, but they do know who HDFC is. So NPCI or UPI goes and talks to HDFC and asks for the bank account number for Bob at the HDFC. Obviously, HDFC knows the answer to that query because this is, they know who Bob is. They know Bob is a customer of theirs. If they weren't, HDFC would respond back to the UPI and say, we don't know any Bob, please reject this transfer. But if they know Bob, HDFC replies back to NPCI and says, hey, Bob essentially has a bank account at HDFC, and the bank account details are account number 95 at this particular IFSC code. So here you'll see I've used a specific format for the address, which is account number at the rate IFSC code.ifsc.npci, which is the absolute address that NPCI uses for making bank transfers. Finally, at this point, NPCI or UPI knows what the bank account details are for Bob. It knows the bank account details for Alice as well. It initiates an IMPS transfer. The IMPS transfer happens between two bank accounts, which means no money has been deducted, and both the parties need to be acknowledged back. UPI will get back to Kotak and inform them that 500 INR has been deducted from their account. Please let the customer know. Similarly, they'll also acknowledge the same thing on the other side to Bob and say, hey, HDFC, Bob has some money in their account. Please let them know. Please credit it to their account. So essentially, this is the standard IMPS procedure that happens. Now, once the IMPS transfer has happened, the banks themselves must acknowledge the transfer to the payer and the payee as well. That's the final step of the process, which is where you have the Kotak Bank themselves telling the payer, hey, transfer was successful to Bob at the HDFC. And finally, the HDFC bank, which was the accepting bank, also tells the payee on the other side, Alice at the rate Kotak gave you some money. The important thing to note here is the part that UPI played in this was essentially over here in this query. Please provide bank account number for Bob at the HDFC. It allows it a way to convert these bank-specific addresses to normal addresses. And it also allows a common interface for the banks to talk to UPI. What this means is, at the end of the day, there's a successful transfer happening from Alice to Bob over a virtual account address, a virtual payment address that was essentially Bob at the HDFC. And finally, we have the money transfer. Let's see a simple diagram to maybe figure this better. There was a payer who has a bank account at Kotak. Kotak is the only party that's talking to UPI on the payer end, on the payee end. The left should be payer. I'm not sure why it says pay. The payer talks to Kotak. Kotak internally talks to UPI. UPI internally does the IMPS transfers. UPI talks to both the consenting banks on each side, which is Kotak and HDFC, and the banks themselves interact with the customers. So at no stage is the customer directly interacting with UPI, for example. There can also be other involved parties in a UPI transaction, but other than PSPs, which is payment service providers, essentially banks at this point, the only parties, the only other application that, the only other request that they can make to UPI is a collect transfer. So there can be certain other parties such as merchants and payment providers which can talk to UPI and initiate collect payments. But as of now, this is pretty much the basic scenario for UPI, where UPI will be initiating an IMPS transfer between two different bank accounts, and the banks, it's up to the bank themselves to figure out how does the customer initiate such a payment. So this is just some of the scope of what NPCI handles. We'll be talking about what each and every entity in this handles internally. I think there was a slide at the top which said no bullet points, except for that slide. I was lying. There are 3 more slides over here. I hope you'll forgive me for this. NPCI is doing a lot more than just these 3 things, but these are the primary tasks which they take care of in a UPI transfer. The first is global payment addresses, which essentially means they're taking care of any payment address that they can resolve on their own, which means things like IFSC codes. They're also taking care of RuPay cards. They're also taking care of Aadhaar-based addresses. So if you transfer money to an Aadhaar card, where does money go? That's being taken care of by NPCI. And finally, let's say if you transfer money to a bank account now, to a phone number, what bank account address does this phone number correspond to? It depends. NPCI will be resolving it on their own. And finally, what does a payment service provider handle? A payment service provider handles local payment addresses, which are things like Bob at the HDFC, as we saw earlier. They also handle all customer interactions, which is things which are the customer-facing banking applications. And finally, they are still handling the intra-bank transfer. So if Bob at HDFC wants to transfer money to Alice at HDFC, it doesn't necessarily have to go via UPI. The bank can do that transfer within their own network. By all customer interactions, it's not just limited to simple payment transfer requests. It's also about how the second factor of a payment is happening. So the second factor will happen within the payment app itself using an MPIN, which is a mobile PIN used in mobile banking services already. And this is also the responsibility of the payment service provider to handle. Finally, what the customer is handling on their end. A customer is initiating and authorizing payments. A customer can initiate a collect request or a pay request. If I'm initiating a collect request, the customer on the person who's still paying on the other side will be doing the authorization. I can just initiate a collect request on my end. And if I'm doing a normal pay request, if I'm paying someone some money, I'll have to do the authorization on my part. The authorization over here is proving that you have the phone and proving that you have the MPIN or the second factor, which may change if, let's say, we start supporting biometrics and the phone app themselves. And they're also managing bank accounts and identities, which means even if you're using an HDFC banking application, you can still add a PNB bank account over there. You can still add a Kotak bank account over there, and you can prove that you have ownership of that bank account, and just use your single bank application to transfer funds from all 3 accounts. And finally, you also own the second factor, which means the MPIN. So it's up to you to decide where you want to enter the MPIN and authorize the payment. So that's pretty much it for the webinar. This is the last slide of the webinar, which ends with a question mark, curiously. The question mark over here is because the success of UPI itself depends on whether we see mass adoption, as I said earlier. So the people who can ensure that we get mass adoption for UPI across India are right here attending this webinar. And what I want to see is that NPCI has taken a huge leap by releasing UPI. They've done a great job at it. They worked at it really, really hard. And now it's up to us. It's up to companies. It's up to developers. It's up to merchants all across India and even customers to see that UPI grows to its full potential. So if you're a customer, just go and ask your bank whether they're integrated with UPI and when can you start using it. No other country in the world can boast of a payment solution system that is global and as well designed as UPI. But in order for UPI to succeed, we need cooperation from all parties. It's not just customers, it's even banks to make UPI the success that it can be. We need banks to start working really hard on their payment applications and make sure that they're as interoperable as UPI promises it to be. And that's only going to happen if everyone across the spectrum starts to take care about UPI, starts to notice that yes, we have this really cool thing called UPI that we should be using, and maybe we should start caring about it. And that's pretty much it from our side. I'll move on to the Q&A now. Just give me a second, I'll drink some water. Thank you for reminding. So I'll move to the questions one by one. Why UPI? What's the ideal target transaction demographic where you expect UPI to become the method of choice? For instance, will it replace low value check payments or P2P payments? P2P payments for sure will be affected by UPI. So currently, if I, for example, try to do a IMPS transfer for something I've bought or to a friend of mine, it's not that easy compared to as easy as it would become with UPI. So that P2P payments will be affected for sure. Will it replace low value check payments or B2B? That depends on the adoption itself. If let's say the target audience that you have for a particular sector, if you own a car rental service, it might make sense for you. If your customers are tech savvy enough to start using UPI, yes, it will work for you. And I'm not sure why there's an IP address here. I'll skip that question unless you elaborate somewhere. There are also multiple ways to hack Okay, let me select the question first. And there are also multiple ways to hack transactions in the IT domain itself. So how do you securize end-to-end? That's an interesting question to ask. UPI does take care of security very seriously. It handles this using something called PKI, which is public key infrastructure. Since I see a lot of technical questions in here, I'll try being a bit technical. So what happens is as soon as you enter your payment details, they are encrypted using the public key of the person who is intended to accept that detail. So in the usual case, it will be the bank provider who will be finally seeing those details, and they're encrypted as soon as they leave your phone. So yes, it's not just that. There are also a lot of other considerations in security that you can go through in UPI, but yeah, UPI is fairly secure. Can UPI be used on the desktop in a web app? One of the slides mentioned UPI is targeting only smartphones. Yes, that is correct. UPI is currently only targeting smartphones because you can initiate a collect request from a website. You can initiate a pay request from a website, but at the end, the payment must be authorized on a smartphone, which is what matters. The MPIN must be entered on a smartphone, or else the biometric verification must be done on a smartphone. So even though you can do some bits of UPI from a web app by initiating requests, smartphones are needed at the end of it. PKI, this is a very weird question. PKI is also hackable, not if your key strengths are large enough. No, I believe PKI is one of the better parts of security that we have today, and as long as the key strengths are significant, it's not hackable. How does UPI work for credit card payments? Who bears MDR? Is UPI open to third party, or is it only for banks? 3 questions. Okay, I'll go one by one. How does UPI work for credit card payments? Credit card payments are currently not part of UPI. which means they are bank transfers between different banks. On the other side, you also have RuPay card transfers, which is essentially, as of now, a mapping between RuPay cards to a bank account, which means you provide a bank account number to a RuPay card number to UPI and it will transfer it to the correct bank account. Who bears MDR? The charges, essentially, since UPI is running on top of IMPS, the charges are same as IMPS, which means they will vary depending on what's the starting bank and what's the ending bank, what's the issuer and the acquiring bank. The MDR would be borne by, I believe, it's still an IMPS transfer, so the person initiating the transfer will be paying for it. Is UPI open to third party or is it only for banks? As of now, only for banks. However, other parties can apply to UPI and get access to it, but the access they'll only be granted as a collect payment access. They won't be granted entire access to the UPI infrastructure. The cost is the same as IMPS transfer once again, and it is slightly vague as defined as of now. People have raised questions about it earlier as well, and yes, this is kind of vague because IMPS transfer rates are not decided by NPCI or UPI; they're decided by the banks themselves. So it will vary. What about second factor authentication? In this case, UPI takes care of second factor. It is perfectly legal and correct in its implementation and how it handles two-factor as per the RBI guidelines, which means the first part of authentication it uses is you having access to your phone itself. The second it uses is currently an MPIN. It can also use an Aadhaar biometric verification as second factor. Everything else except virtual address can be common for multiple banks per user. Can be common for multiple banks per user. I'm not entirely sure what this question is, but yes, you can have UPI allows you to have multiple bank accounts associated with the same identity. For example, you can have a mobile number backlinking to different bank accounts. Can be common for multiple banks per user. Yes, I believe so. A virtual payment address has to be unique, but everything else would resolve to a unique address anyway. Okay, maybe you can clarify the question a bit. How can RuPay card be used for UPI? So RuPay card is an interesting part of the picture because NPCI runs the RuPay card network, which means if you transfer money to a RuPay card itself, it will reach the person who owns a bank account for that particular RuPay card. Wallets hold money. If they're integrated into NPCI, who will hold the money? Interesting question. I believe wallets will have to be somewhat different in their implementation of UPI because as of now, UPI is a payment transfer between two different parties. And if a wallet is holding your money, will you be getting interest on it? Will a bank transfer happen? It's not really a bank transfer if it happens from wallet to a bank account number. But I think this is a question that NPCI will have to answer once they integrate into UPI. Enjoyed PPT. Thank you. You can get in touch with me via my email address. I'll switch to that slide soon. Give me a second. I'll shift to that slide actually. So somebody asks, isn't Chiller doing the exact same thing already? No, they are not. UPI is vastly different from what Chiller is doing for the very reason that UPI works across bank accounts, which is vastly different. Yes, you said UPI uniqueness comes from using mobile numbers or Aadhaar numbers. But the same mobile number could be used for multiple bank accounts, yes. And essentially, NPCI and UPI will be providing an infrastructure within your bank account application. So, for example, in the HDFC bank account application, if you add multiple bank accounts with the same mobile number, you'll be able to choose which one is the default one and so on. how does risk get mitigated for merchant payments when a refund is initiated? So this is still unclear as of now in UPI because refunds are not part of the current UPI spec as a result of it being piggybacking on IMPS. So once you make an IMPS transfer currently, let's say from your bank account to somebody else's bank account, you have no way of asking for a refund except maybe contacting the customer themselves. So it's the very same thing over here. When merchant makes a collect request, is there a timeline for pay to pay? Yes, there is a timeline which is defined by your collect request itself. You specify in your collect request, this must be paid within 7 days and so on. Okay, some people are asking me to scroll, so I'll try to scroll. How is second factor authentication done? I think I answered this previously as well. It's done via an MPIN or biometric authentication on the mobile banking application itself. Is it possible to set up recurring payments using UPI? So this is an interesting point because the UPI spec does mention recurring payments, and how they plan to tackle it is via a collect request that you initiate and you set up a sort of mandate allowing a particular merchant to accept payments easily on a recurring basis. So you can essentially say in your collect request, hey, I'll be collecting payments worth 50 up to a maximum limit of 2,000 every month. And that is the ideal goal. However, it is not possible as of now. This is something that you'll be seeing in a future version of UPI. Account number at IFSC code is visible to the payee. Account number is 16-digit or some other generated number. If I'm talking about the account number at IFSC codes, addresses, the IFSC addresses are essentially visible to the public. So, but at the same time, if I initiate a payment transfer to Bob at the HDFC, I'll just get a response back saying the payment has been done to Bob at the HDFC. It's not visible. The original it depends on the implementation actually on the PSP side. If the PSP will have some information about the bank account number, but it's up to the PSP to decide whether they want to display it to the payee or not. It should ideally not be visible if a payment was initiated using just a virtual payment address, but I don't think that's part of the spec. So it should be visible in almost all cases. What's the difference between global and local payment address? A global payment address is resolved by NPCI. A local payment address is resolved by a bank. So if you have something like Aadhaar card number, it's resolved by NPCI. If you have something like a one-time token, this is a payment for my birthday cake at the HDFC, then that's a local payment address, and only HDFC knows how to resolve that address to your bank account. Okay, there are a lot of repeat questions. What is a global payment address? Something that's resolved by NPCI. Let me scroll down a bit. Wow. How is UPI different from an IMPS? UPI is different from IMPS because currently there's no way for a customer to easily access IMPS across banking networks. So, for example, if you have a bank account application, you can only initiate a bank account transfer from your particular bank account. It'll be limited by how your bank supports that. But once every bank supports UPI, there's a common interface for IMPS transfers being provided not just to customers, but also to merchants to initiate collect requests, for example. Will settlements be on real time for merchants? So the way, yes, they should be because it's based on IMPS. But at the same time, UPI can only ask the IMPS network to initiate a payment, initiate an immediate fund transfer. It's up to the bank. If the bank declines a payment fund transfer, it won't work. If the bank is down at the time, it won't be real time. So there are caveats, but usually it will be real time or as good to real time as possible. Is there any limit cap on the transactions? Same as IMPS. So if your bank account places limits on IMPS transfers, it will still stay there. It will launch in tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well. UPI is just a technology which is available on smartphones. It's not launching in specific regions. It's not like 4G. It will launch everywhere together. Will there be any role left of payment brands like RuPay, Visa, MasterCard, etc., as all transfers will happen from bank X to bank Y? This sounds like a very idealistic idea where you want, if I have some money and I want to give it to you, I'll use UPI. But that's a very short-sighted view to take, because card payments are not going away anytime soon. Even net banking or even wallet payments are not going anywhere anytime soon. So this might be answerable maybe 5 years down the line. But as of now, we don't see this happening. Pay can use mobile number as an ID to transfer money to payer having an Aadhaar ID. I want to ask this: is this cross-border possible with UPI? What is the earning for the banks to offer the service to customers? Any timelines like NEFT and RTGS? The timelines are same as IMPS. What is the earning for the banks to offer the service to customers? Banks are in the business of letting people transfer money. So it's the same reason they support NEFT and RTGS transfers, because that is why people run banks and people put money in banks to let them transfer as well. So that's a service being provided by banks essentially. And finally, pay can use mobile. Okay. Okay, this is, there are a lot of repeat questions I'm seeing. I've answered this already. You can see the questions that I'm selecting, right?
Yeah. Okay, I am.
Okay, perfect.
I'm also keeping it here.
Okay. If I can add a PNB account in HDFC app, how will UPI verify that the person adding the account is really the owner of the account? This is a nice question. UPI does this via an IMPS transfer somewhere in a range of 0 to 1 rupees. And since it happens via the IMPS network, NPCI can track that particular payment happening. And once the payment happens, they can verify that you are the person owning that particular account. Okay, how many? Oh my God, there are lots and lots of questions. Will it be any mobile app for UPI? Yes, each and every bank application will start supporting UPI on its own, which means if you have an HDFC Bank application, you should be getting an update sometime this summer. If you have a Kotak Bank app, you'll be getting an update. So it's the same thing. There is no common single unified app for UPI, which I find really, really neat, because it lets you at least the implementation details to the banks themselves. Request you to collaborate and post the FAQ of the session with the answers. This will be doing for sure. So we're working on a blog post as well as the slides will be up. The blog post will be up. You can check out the video later as well. And finally, we'll be posting a FAQ of FAQ of all the questions that you people have asked. Thanks for all the neat questions. Actually, you're making me think some interesting. Thanks. Can I integrate UPI in my mobile app for my customers to pay directly to merchants? Yes, you can. You can start talking to NPCI. So NPCI allows non-PSP applications to initiate collect requests. However, it's still very vague on what is the criteria for getting selected as such a merchant. At the same time, there will also be other third-party apps and third-party merchants who will be taking over the responsibility and a general direction as a third-party provider, which can initiate a collect request on your behalf. In what order are you answering questions? I'm scrolling up and down to give everyone a fair chance. Okay, can I sort this? Answered questions, questions, and spam. I can't sort this by votes, otherwise I would have done that. I'm leaving this question for now. I'll come back to it. Who settles the merchant payments at the end of the day? It's an IMPS transfer that's happening. You send a request to your bank. The bank sends a request to UPI. UPI initiates an IMPS transfer between the two parties once it's aware that both the parties are valid and legitimate. And there's no settlement as such happening because it's just an IMPS transfer. An IMPS transfer is not the same as a settlement. Okay, I'm looking for +2 marked questions now. Oh, they're at the top. Okay. Which means nodal account needs to be present if at all an MDR has to be collected per transaction from merchants, which spoils the UX of instant credit, like how it is in current scenario for IMPS. Yes, if you might need a nodal account in some cases. For example, if you're running a marketplace, you'll be needing a nodal account for sure. So it depends on the scenario. It doesn't work for each and every use case as of now. But this is something that the designers of UPI are keenly aware of, and we can hopefully see some updates on this going ahead. How does NPCI plan to ensure the entry of MPIN is not compromised? So they've taken this in a very roundabout manner, which is by releasing a secure library for all three payment platforms they're supporting. The three payment platforms are Android, iOS, and Windows phones. And on all three of these platforms, UPI or NPCI will be providing their own specific secure SDK, which will be embedded in each and every banking application. So the HDFC app will have an SDK provided by NPCI, which is the one that will be accepting the MPIN, and which is the one that will be passing on the MPIN encrypted to the bank, to UPI itself. How does UPI stop me from adding my friend's account on my bank's app? You need to verify ownership of the particular account, and to do that, you'll have to make a money transfer from that particular account. So as soon as you try adding a bank account, it will try to initiate a particular, it will try to initiate a UPI pay request actually from that particular account. And if that payment goes through, that particular account is considered as verified. Well, with the cost of using UPI for users, will it be cheaper than IMPS? No, it will not be cheaper than IMPS. It will be exactly as costly as IMPS. Will there be any device integrated with UPI which can be used by the merchants to accept in-store payments, a hardware device? Yes, so this is left as an implementation details for the payment service providers and third-party providers. This is not part of UPI itself. But yeah, this is something that NPC is left open. So if you want to build something on top of UPI, you can do it. However, you're still limited by the second factor limitations. So the way that UPI is better than IMPS is because it's interoperable within banks, yes. Also currently for IMPS, you need to know all of those things, but in UPI, a phone number is all that is needed, yes. Another thing that UPI brings to the table is collect payments, which is not present in IMPS, at least not as easily as it will be present in UPI. How is it different from existing services like mVisa from Visa Inc? Because they don't work for bank transfers. They only work for credit cards for a particular card network. This works across all banks. This should be working across all banks once the integrations are done. Okay, maybe I should scroll down. I'm sorry, people are asking me specific questions about the UPI hackathon. I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer them. You should reach out to NPCI or the hackathon organizers for the same. Yeah. Give me a minute. Oh, sure. How is it different from NEFT or RTGS? You should look up the docs, or the NPCI website has really simple explanations for what NEFT is, what RTGS is, and what IMPS is. And there are three different payment methods on how they work. They work on gross settlements, NEFT works on batch payments, while IMPS is immediate. And UPI runs on top of IMPS, so it automatically becomes differentiated. Okay, I think I should answer this. Everyone's been waiting too long for this. But a service provider like Razorpay come into this. The PS shouldn't be capital, by the way. We use a small P everywhere. We're still figuring out UPI. We're working on a lot of different things. One of the important things that UPI allows us to do is build third-party applications that allow merchants to initiate collect requests. That is one of the most obvious things. But we are also working on a lot of other PSP-related things. For example, we have access to the PSP beta APIs, and hopefully you'll be seeing these things coming up soon. Yeah, we'll make announcements once we are ready to announce things. Okay. Wait.
Yeah, this question was asked.
Okay, where does this? Yeah, this is the question that I just answered. Will be incentive for small merchants and small service providers to use UPI if there's a cost involved? Why will those who currently prefer cash economy? Because it's far more easier to become cashless. It's an incentive not just for the government, but it's also an incentive for the customer who doesn't have to care about cash. If you're making a transfer worth, okay, you're talking about small merchants and small service providers. Uh, it's not really going to be that useful for buying a Coca-Cola bottle, obviously. But if you're doing some significant worth of transactions that you would usually be paying via credit card or debit card today, you can easily take those and translate them back to UPI, and hopefully we'll see lower costs involved going ahead in time. So that should become more and more incentivized. Okay. What will happen if a person has two accounts which are linked to one mobile number? The way it will work is uh, NPCI currently runs a *99 hash mobile service, which allows you to pick between these things. And similarly, this interface will become available in your bank application as well. We will be able to add all the bank accounts associated with the mobile number and check them and choose which one will be used by default. Can the payee enter MPIN on a POS terminal? I believe no, because NPCI has recommendation guidelines regarding the secure component that the SDK that they give out and how it must be included only in a PSP app, and the PSP app must undergo certain certification, not exactly certification process, but they must be vetted thoroughly before going live by NPCI itself. As the customer's choice, the provider's choice to select authentication method. Um, Currently, the authentication method, I'm not sure what you mean by authentication method. If you mean something like MPIN versus biometrics, it's up to the customer, or how the customer is interacting with the PSP before. And if you're talking about what payment method to choose, as in which one of my bank accounts I want to use, it should be left up to the customer. If you have multiple bank accounts associated with the mobile number, you'll still get to know and you can pick. But if the collect request is for a particular bank account number, then you have to use that one. Okay. Does an account holder have to register for UPI-based service in bank, or will it be activated by default? Currently, the registration system for UPI is essentially the same as an MPIN registration, which is the mobile banking registration. So when you open a bank account, you might have received a mobile banking registration MPIN and your details for that. If you do not have them, you can ask your bank for it, and they'll gladly provide it to you right now. And these are the same credentials that will be used going ahead with UPI. So you can become partially ready for UPI before it's launched. How does it work for merchants? How collect requests will be initiated by merchants? What app? As of now, you can actually use just the mobile banking application once they are integrated. You log into your mobile banking application using your merchant bank account and initiate a collect transfer from there itself. If going ahead, however, NPCI wants to allow other applications, third-party applications, even aggregator applications to as a gateway for collect payment requests, and it's up to NPCI to allow or disallow a particular merchant application from accepting payments via that route. So for now, however, the bank applications will themselves allow it for sure, though. Okay. Can UPI be used as an intermediary? Merchant account payer pays UPI. UPI settles the amount to pay. Is this possible? No, it is not. UPI is a payment method between two parties. UPI doesn't run a bank account of their own. UPI is not running a nodal account. So if you want something like an escrow payment, you'll have to look elsewhere. UPI doesn't support this feature as of now. What would happen to UPI account linked to my mobile number if it is assigned to someone else? The UPI account linked to my mobile number, if the mobile number is assigned to someone else, so the way it works is you're allowed to revoke and change. You can get your mobile number changed on your bank itself. And finally, all the payment addresses that are local, for example, the Bob at HDFC address that we considered earlier, they are all considered to be revocable by nature. So if you switch your bank account provider, or if you want to move to a different alias from Bob, you become someone else, you can change your aliases by talking to your PSP. As current construct, only a bank can be a PSP, but a startup can partner with a bank and route requests via partner bank system to UPI system. Now, in this case, can data reside in startup system as well as bank system? Yes. However, at the same time, UPI has made a very long list of guidelines that every bank must follow while awarding such a contract to interoperate with UPI to any third party, and those are very strict guidelines that they need to follow and vet. So it's a lot of vetting for a third party to go through before they'll be granted access to any bank as a partner program to run UPI. How will SaaS services process recurring billing from the users? You can't do it as of now in the first iteration of UPI. However, UPI has talks about this in their papers, and hopefully down the line, this will essentially be working via collect requests. So you'll see collect requests also working as mandates for future recurring transactions. When I add a new bank account, to whom will a payment request be initiated to verify the account? I believe it's to the bank itself. I'm not entirely sure on this one. I can check, and if you can drop me a mail, I'll get back to you on this one. Will merchants provide UPI transactions from 8th April? Merchants, no. Banks, maybe. What's my estimate? Sometime this summer, we should see some of the major banks hopping into UPI. Summer being early monsoon, maybe. Yeah. Okay, I think there are a lot of other non-UPI related questions. For example, people are asking about whether Razorpay does mobile payment audits. I'm not sure. We don't do such things, but for the bodies, we of course handle mobile payments on our own. And okay, this one is +5. As you said, the person who's initiating the transaction will be the MDR in the case of a collect request. The merchant sends a payment request to the consumer. Is the consumer who is also bear the cost in this scenario also? The person initiating the payment, so the person from whom the money is going away, will be bearing the cost because it's an IMPS transfer from party A to party B. And I think that's pretty much. Can you provide a few more details to you about how to apply as a non-PSP player? Log on to the NPC website. They're also running a hackathon where they're doing, I believe, weekly AMAs. I think the next one is 19th. I'm not entirely sure, but you can go over there, sign up, and I'm sure NPC will be more than willing to get you on board. Okay, I think that's pretty much it from our side. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending. It was great having you and looking at all these questions. It was really interesting answering all these questions. Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you, everyone. That's bye from me. Thanks for attending.